to build upon what you said earlier. So you talked about how there is a difference in what is the objective in a private organization, where the objective would be profit maximization, but a state body objective would largely be welfare optimization, welfare maximization. Having done both, were there times when you felt that your experience was useful there? So from private to the public, because you were the finance minister, so you would, my understanding that you would be well versed with what the requirements were of the industry or how they would like to operate. So, and whether there is a challenge also in that transition from profit optimization to welfare.
Since you're all students, I'd actually take a step back. One of the most interesting courses I took at my MBA program was taught by a visiting professor. He was somebody who worked in the New York Fed, and he took a year off and he came and taught. Professor Strahan, I think. And he gave like a winding up lecture for about 2 hours on the course. Well, probably the one of the most brilliant lectures I've heard. And it was completely about, it was called Advanced Corporate Finance something. So corporate finance was like an introduction to corporate finance and then corporate finance 2. And all it was about was aligning incentives of the employees, the kind of executives and the shareholders. This is incredibly complex problem, right? How, like I'm sure you've all heard of the agency problem, and you've all heard of other kinds of incentivization issues, and you use compensation, whether it's in fixed compensation and variable. Should it be restricted shares? Should it be options? What is it? Do you really want them to be levered bets, and what does that do to risk-taking behavior? Heads I win, tails the company loses. So it's actually quite complex to even figure out how to align the incentives in a profit-maximizing entity, all the way from the hourly worker to the CEO and the board members, let alone the shareholders who are passive shareholders if it's a public company, who don't have any day-to-day involvement in the company. And you've heard thousands of cases of the kind of lunatics taking over the asylum, right? Of the CEO and all these guys deciding they own the company rather than the shareholders, and acting in a very detrimental to the shareholders' interests and beneficial to their interests, overpaying themselves, obviously. That problem manifests itself much, much worse in government. In government, the people who are really those that need the benefit of government's goods, services, or pension payments or support are not audible or visible to people sitting at the top of the pyramid. And we did a survey with one of my economic advisors. Incidentally, my other connection is that both Raghu and Arvind sit on the Tamilnadu Chief Minister's Economic Advisory Council, which I put together when I was finance minister. But another member of that council is Esther Duflo, professor at MIT, a Nobel laureate, incidentally. And we worked with her to look at the old age pension that we give. It's like 1,000 rupees a month. I'd been advocating for it to be higher, but a different story. That 1,000 rupees a month, does it reach the people we really want it to reach? Like, because we'll have, two types of errors, right? One type of error is visible. When we started purifying the data, we found like 100,000 beneficiaries who were listed as dead in the death certificates were still getting these payments. So clearly that error, that those who should not be getting it, that happens. But I'm much more concerned about the reverse error, which is those who are eligible for this benefit are not getting it. That error was happening. That is, we were getting to the second lowest level of the pyramid, but we were not getting to the lowest level of the pyramid, because the people at the lowest level of the pyramid were usually older women who lived alone, didn't have a smartphone, and didn't have anybody who would take them to a government office to fill out a form, and didn't have any way of being informed that they had this right. If they suddenly, their son or somebody who was taking care of them passed away and they were now, eligible, nobody would tell them that they were eligible. So the state has a really hard time identifying those that it is really supposed to alleviate the condition of. And in fact, the state gets crowded by the noises of people who are super privileged, have super access, who basically, and that's in every democracy. I'm not talking about state of Tamilnadu or India. It happens in America. So this alignment of incentives and elimination of lobbying and cornering and kind of gaming the system, that is the hardest part. That's true in corporate life, that's true in private enterprise, and that's true in government. So I wouldn't say the contrast between profit maximizing versus public good maximizing is the real dichotomy. That is very clear. That's what you're supposed to do. How you do it in a way that, in the case of corporate entities, actually benefits the shareholders rather than the intermediary levels, because they are the true owners. And in the case of governments, it benefits the actual people at the bottom of the pyramid rather than the intermediaries. That includes politicians, IAS officers, government servants, other middlemen, touts, whatever. That's the real complex part. In that sense, they're very, very similar problems. It goes down to human nature, to alignment of incentives, to usage of data, to elimination of, in many cases, elimination of layers or elimination of processes that are ripe for rent-seeking. So, for example, when I was finance minister, I didn't approve the creation of any new government offices for just putting government staff in an office. I didn't think that the future was that we should have, citizens come to a government office to have their complaints dealt with. It should be online to the extent possible. Tamil Nadu has relatively high literacy, relatively high income, therefore highest penetration of internet, smartphones, etc. And for those who couldn't, that we would go and find them at their house. So the Chief Minister gave us all these programs, right? Illam Thedi Kalvi, Makkalai Thedi Marthum, from chronic disease medicines to remedial education to pension life certificates validation to mustering all of these. We said either you do it online or we'll come to your house. You don't need to come to a government office anymore. Because the minute they come to the government office, the risk of rent seeking, of complexity rises. So, this is just one example. I'm saying the complexity is of designing processes and aligning incentives at the multiple levels that you necessarily have to have, or eliminating levels if you can, throughout the organization, because the intent may be something at the top. It may be translated to something else all the way down. Just structurally, not because people are bad people or good people, but because the system is not designed to align the incentives properly.